In this month's episode of A View from Mount Sinai, we're addressing a timely topic, daylight saving time. First, let's discuss what daylight saving time does. It simply adjusts clock time to move an hour of daylight from the morning to the evening for 8 months of the year, from spring until fall. What's the history of daylight saving time? As is true with many things in the US, including electricity, many people believe that the concept of daylight saving time was first invented by Benjamin Franklin. While Franklin did write a satirical essay in 1784, while he was serving in France, criticizing the French custom of staying up late into the night, it really had nothing to do with daylight savings time. It had more to do with trying to save candles. The concept of a nationally standardized time in the US didn't take hold until the late 19th century and was first advocated by the railroads due to, obviously, scheduling. Before that, time was determined separately in each location around the US, which was not a problem because people rarely traveled very far from where they lived. Standard time was adopted in law in the US in 1918 with the adoption of time zones. A version of daylight savings time was instituted nationally by President Roosevelt during World War II. He called it wartime, and it was instituted for the entire year as an energy-saving measure. But when the war ended, daylight or wartime ended as well. What we now refer to as daylight saving time was not adopted permanently in the US until the Uniform Time Act of 1966 was passed by Congress. The primary reason given for the institution of daylight saving time were energy saving related. The law cited various studies indicating that daylight saving time would produce a significant reduction in electrical energy consumption. The dates of daylight saving time were further expanded by the Energy Policy Act of 2005 to begin the second Sunday in March and end the first Sunday in November, again to save additional energy. But studies have found mixed results when it comes to actual energy reductions, with some finding that energy savings of about 0.5% to 1%, while other studies actually found that daylight saving time increased energy use. And with the widespread availability of LEDs now reducing lighting energy by so much, one has to question how much energy is actually saved by having one more hour of daylight in the evening as opposed to the morning. So in addition to the issues of changing to daylight saving time each spring and back to standard time each fall, not fulfilling its intended energy saving goals, there's also growing controversy of its usefulness for other purposes as well. Recently, more and more people are advocating for this time change to be abolished entirely in the US and to adopt one uniform time throughout the entire year. But the issue is, which should it be? Standard time or daylight time? Let's explore both sides of the issue to see why people are advocating for one or the other. First, let's talk about standard time. Standard time seems to be the less popular of the two options among the general public, who seem to prefer longer evening daylight to more daylight in the morning. But this option is popular among researchers who study sleep and circadian entrainment. Let's ask a sleep expert why they would advocate for a change to standard time throughout the year. Hello, Dr. Flynn Evans. Please tell us a little bit about the type of research that you do.
So I'm a circadian physiologist and sleep researcher, and my research focuses on examining both the short and long-term consequences of sleep loss and circadian misalignment, mostly in real-world populations. And I lead a large sleep research lab, and I serve as a consultant to the American Academy of Sleep Medicine Public Safety Committee.
So, why is the American Academy of Sleep Medicine advocating to do an adoption of standard time permanently year round? What benefits do you think that will provide?
First, we know that there are a host of negative consequences that come from the population losing an hour of sleep after the springtime change. We see increases in motor vehicle crashes, we see increased cardiovascular issues, we see more missed medical appointments, and we also have cyberloafing, which is reduced efficiency at work. The second issue that we see is that when we set our clocks to daylight saving time, our internal clock or our circadian rhythm becomes kind of offset from the social time of events for most people. And it's this mismatch between the time in our bodies and the social time in our watches that's associated with a whole other host of negative consequences. And with that, we have ongoing sleep loss, we have poor cognitive function, we have increased risk of cancer, increased risk of heart disease, increased risk of diabetes too. So the American Academy of Sleep Medicine's position is that a change to permanent standard time is really best aligned with our body clock or that circadian rhythm.
What would you say to people who either want to leave things the way they are, everyone kind of just gets used to the status quo, or who want to adopt daylight saving time all year round?
Yeah, well, there's no question that the biannual time changes have a negative impact on health and well-being. Changing the clocks it comes with significant cost to the population. Maybe you can't see it at the individual level, but when we look across everybody, we can see those effects. And the springtime change is especially difficult because not only do we lose that hour of sleep, but we also have to get up an hour earlier relative to during standard time. And so, like I mentioned before, when we switch those clocks, we see some immediate effects. We see mood disturbances. People are a little grumpier after we change the clocks. We see those motor vehicle crashes, medical errors, hospital admissions, strokes, and then, traffic accidents. While you might not think that an hour of sleep loss is significant, right after the springtime change, we see a 6% increase in traffic fatalities right after that time change. So, there is potential for individuals to be affected. And I think it's understandable that the idea of maintaining permanent daylight saving time might kind of seem appealing to people because daylight saving time happens when we move into spring and summer. And in that time, we have more light in general. And so many people think of daylight saving time as summertime. But the reality is that if we were to switch to daylight saving time year round, we wouldn't have more light in the winter. It would just be that we'd have light sort of timed different relative to our social time. And so I think the reality is really more obvious when we think about what would happen there. Sunrise would not occur in the winter until after 8 in the morning for much of the country. And this means that most people would have to wake up in the dark for school or for work during the entire winter time. And also, we've done this before. The US actually did switch to permanent daylight saving time in 1974, but it was so unpopular that in February, Congress decided to switch back to the twice a year switch because basically people were just sick of getting up in the dark all winter long. And so we know that daylight saving time doesn't work. And the US isn't the only example of that. Other countries have done it too. And in every case, they have switched back to their old way of doing things because permanent daylight saving time just doesn't align with our internal clocks. And so as a result of all of that evidence, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine supports, just eliminating those seasonal time changes and adopting year-round standard time because it promotes better sleep, health, and well-being.
Next, let's talk about daylight time year-round. Advocates for changing to daylight saving time throughout the year point to the need for more daylight during evening hours because that is when people are more likely to be out of their homes, driving, walking, participating in other activities. These people argue that more daylight in evening would improve safety, reduce traffic-related injuries, and increase economic activity. Let's ask one of these advocates why they want to change to daylight time throughout the year. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Dan, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you? Thanks
well.
for joining us. So please tell us a little bit about the Orrin G. Hatch Foundation. I have a hard time saying that.
Yeah, I'd love to. So our namesake, of course, is Senator Orrin G. Hatch, which As many people know, at the time of his retirement, he was actually the most successful legislator of all time, just in terms of the number of bills passed. It was over 750 bills that he'd passed by the time he retired. And he was renowned for being a Republican, but also being a bipartisan deal maker, someone who had a dogged determination to find areas of bipartisan consensus, no matter the political climate. So what we are, the Hatch Foundation, is we're a think tank that exists to extend and build upon his legacy, even long after he's gone. So what the Hatch Foundation does, our motto is civility and solutions, and we're constantly devoted to finding bipartisan solutions to some of the biggest problems facing our country. And one of those just happens to be daylight saving time.
And you're the perfect person to talk about this then. So why is the foundation advocating for the US to adopt daylight saving time on a permanent year-round basis?
That's a great question. And so here at the Hatch Foundation, we see two benefits. So I'm going to talk first about the economic benefits and second about the public health benefits. So let's start with the economy. At this time, we're facing a lot of economic turmoil in this country. And so a lot of people don't know what to do economically speaking right now. But what if I told you, Dan, that right now we could pass a multi-decade, multi-billion-dollar stimulus package that is 100% tax-free? Not only that, it enjoys overwhelming bipartisan support and carries with it significant public health benefits to boot. So what I'm talking about there actually is making daylight saving time permanent, because that's effectively what it is. It's a huge boost to the economy. Let's just talk about energy savings first and foremost. Everyone points to the energy savings brought about from daylight saving time, which was actually the initial reason for it in the first place. But some people debate the extent to which it saves energy year over year, and that's fine. But then let's talk about the amount of consumer sales that would increase if we made daylight saving time permanent. We actually know from a study done by JP Morgan that every year around November, when we push the clock back, we actually lose about 3.5% of consumer sales every year. And so if we were to get rid of that clock change just in November, that's saving hundreds of millions of dollars each year. And this isn't even to talk about the amount of productivity that is lost each year with the clock change, both in March and November, people coming into work more tired, more laggard. And so there's, in terms of productivity, we also lose millions of dollars every year just from making the clock change. Another thing is, if we had sunsets that are later in the evening, people are more incentivized to go shopping, to go work out, to go do just normal daily activities when the sun is out longer. Studies have shown that as well. So there's huge economic benefits to be gained from making daylight saving time permanent. Now let's just talk about the public health benefits as well. There's bipartisan understanding that every year when we change the clocks, both in March and in November, there's a lot of issues that come along with that. We've seen that suicides actually spike the days after daylight saving time changes in November. We also know that heart attacks spike. We know that car accidents spike. We know that there's more hypertension just because people are stressed, which leads to heart issues across the board. What's more, we know that when the sun sets later in the evening, kids don't play outside as often. And so people in general don't exercise as often. So there's many public health benefits to be gained if we can just get rid of this unforced error. That's what daylight saving time is.
So what would you say to people on the other side who advocate either, oh, well, let's just leave things as they are because it's always been this way, although it hasn't always been, but at least as long as most people have been alive, it's been this way, or who want to do the opposite and switch to standard time on a year-round basis?
It's a great question. And so we know at this point, there aren't that many people who support the constant insanity every year of changing our clocks twice a year. But to those people, I would just point to those things I previously mentioned, the amount of lives that are lost every year from this annual clock change. And I understand as well that sleep scientists in particular seem to be more partial to the idea of keeping standard time year round. And I understand that perspective 100%. My one concern with that is I think this is a complex problem that is a multivariate issue. By that, I mean, it's not just sleep that's being harmed. You have to look at the other health conditions that are exacerbated by earlier sunsets, in particular, anxiety, depression, and seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is another big one. Surely that's exacerbated, and a lot of studies bear that out, by having fewer sunlight hours that you're actually awake for throughout the day. So I think it's a complex issue, and sleep is an important variable for sure, but in terms of mental illness, childhood obesity, physical exercise. There are so many other variables we need to look at when addressing this problem. And that's why we support making daylight saving time permanent, because we believe that it takes in the whole spectrum of issues, not just sleep, if that makes sense.
So to sum up, it is clear that there are benefits and drawbacks to all three options that we have available. If we adopt standard time year-round, we'll have more daylight in the morning for more of the year, but less on summer evenings when many people like to enjoy the outdoors. And this reduction in evening daylight could also result in more traffic fatalities because visibility for drivers will be reduced during the time of day when more people are likely to be driving. Conversely, if we adopt daylight saving time all year round, we'll have more evening daylight, but we'll be waking up and driving to work in the dark from late fall to early spring. This could result in getting less sleep because our biological clock will not be aligned with our alarm clock, which will be forcing us to get up when our body still wants to sleep. Our final option is to leave things the way they are and continue to switch times each spring and fall. But there's no question that this is disruptive for the period immediately following the time of the change. However, there is a net benefit to having standard time in the winter and daylight saving time in the summer. At the Light and Health Research Center, we do not advocate for any one position, but we do want to offer guidance to assist people who may be having trouble adjusting to the time changes. This guidance is based on the simple principle that people should be active in light, wind down activity in dim light in the evening, and then should sleep in darkness. As one example on how to apply this principle, you could eat breakfast on winter mornings under bright electric light, which would help to align your internal biological clock with the external clock time each day. You can find more information about this on our website. Use the QR code on the screen to access more of these helpful tips. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of A View from Mount Sinai. Stay tuned for our next installment coming next month. Thank you.